Android Soo Parallel Blue, written and illustrated by Diana. Chapter 5. The next morning, Sue and Kay were sent on a repair job, which they finished by early afternoon. They met Tish, Lycone, Lilu, and Tink at the closest tube stop to the Zoprat main office. This was a section of the city which contained mostly warehouses, some offices, and no shops. At midday, the streets were fairly deserted. As they passed by the main entrance to the Zoprat building, they could see the security monitor and a human woman sitting at a desk just inside the glass door. Their goal was the warehouse entrance in the back of the building. They didn't have a clear plan of how to get in undetected, but hoped to come up with something. Though the warehouse should have a receiver so shipments of equipment could be directly beamed into the building, those shipments are monitored and incur various fees and taxes. Some businesses have been known to have shipments physically delivered in order to avoid those fees and taxes. As luck would have it, near the warehouse entrance there was a large box on a pallet momentarily left unattended, waiting to be brought into the building. All the androids managed to squeeze into the box through a small hole opening near the bottom. Inside the big box were smaller unlabeled boxes with a bit of room around the sides where the androids fit comfortably, and when the box was brought into the warehouse, the androids went with it. Once inside the warehouse, the box was again left unattended, and the androids snuck out before the box could be unpacked. They hid in various places around the warehouse to wait for night, when hopefully there would be much less activity and they could more easily move around the building undetected. After waiting hours hidden in the warehouse, watching as many workers unpacked deliveries, activity slowed and then finally stopped altogether. The androids cautiously came out of their hiding places. Sue said in a low voice to Lilu, "We just want to find out what's going on around here and try to get Thought to leave with us. We should start with the lowest level and work our way up." The rest followed Lilu through a hallway that sloped down from the warehouse. At the end of the hallway was an open doorway that led into a large room stacked with thousands of black recharge boxes on shelves, storing all the Zoprat workers in recharge mode for the night. As they walked between the dimly lit rows, the androids could hear the low hum of recharge lights inside the boxes. At the other end of that room was another doorway that led into a brightly lit room. They could see movement and hear a woman talking, so approached cautiously. Sue peeked around the wall into the room and saw a tall woman bending over something on the table in front of her. The woman's skin was very white. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly and tied behind her head. Sue couldn't see what was on the table. "Time to sleep," the woman said in a sing-song voice as if speaking to a baby. Sue wanted to see what was on the table and slipped into the room unnoticed by the woman. Sue quietly climbed up some shelving along a nearby wall, then moved out toward the front of a shelf, staying half hidden by a box. What she saw was a male GX android face down on the table. His whole body fit into a form-fitting hollow in the top of the table. He was held by clamps at both wrists and ankles and around his neck and waist. His clothing had been removed. Sue couldn't tell if the android was conscious, but he wasn't moving. Sue thought the woman must be Tran, the android doctor Bry had hired. Tran pulled down a flexible mechanical arm from above the table with a small drill attached to the end. She turned on the drill, brought it down further to the back of the android's neck, and drilled a small hole. The android began to struggle weakly. Tran let go of the drill, which rose to its position above the table, and picked up what looked like a small pistol from a shelf under the table. She shot something into the hole in the android's neck and plugged a wire into the hole that was connected to a large machine at the head of the table. She pushed a button on the machine, which began to hum. Some small colored lights on the front of the machine blinked, and a readout dial registered halfway. The android stopped struggling. After about 5 minutes, Tran turned off the machine, unplugged the wire, and took the restraints off the android. "Sit up." The android pushed himself up and sat on the edge of the table. "Why are you working for Zoprat?" he answered. "Because the wages and benefits are better than where I was working." "How are you treated at Zoprat?" asked Tran. "Very well. Bry is the best boss I've ever had," said the android in a rather expressionless tone of voice. Just then, a human male came through the door, carrying 2 recharge boxes. He put the newly memory-wiped android into one box and closed it. He opened the other box, pulled out a naked female android, and Tran fastened her face down on the table. Then the man left the room, carrying the recharge box with the male android inside. Sue had seen enough. She climbed down the back of the shelf and slipped out the door unnoticed by Tran, who was absorbed in her work. When Sue got back out to the group of androids waiting for her, they all wanted to know what happened, and Sue explained what she had seen as they all quietly walked back up the hallway on their way to the floor above. "She plugged a wire into the back of his head and turned on the machine. I think that did something to his memory, because when she was done, she asked him a bunch of questions about working for Zoprat, and he gave what sounded like programmed answers," said Sue with a shudder. "That must have been what happened to Thought," said Kay. "I wonder why he would agree to that." Sue said, "It didn't look to me like those androids had agreed to anything. I think Bry and Tran are doing it against the androids' wills." Sue motioned for everyone to follow her back up to the warehouse. "I think we've found out enough for now. Let's get back to Enviro Repair before somebody finds us here." "I wish we could take a look at some of Bry's records," said Kay. "Maybe from that we could get some definite proof of his wrongdoing. Something we could take to FTAO that could either force him to change his business practices or put him out of business altogether." Once they got back into the warehouse, it was easy to keep behind shelves and crates out of view of the security cameras. But now the door to the outside was locked, and they would all have to stay there until morning unless they could find a way to open the door before then. "I know something about this type of door," said Tink. "If I can get up to the level of the lock plate, I think I can open it." There were only a few security cameras in the warehouse. To save money, Bry bought cameras that periodically swept a section of the room, rather than stationary cameras that constantly watched a section of the room. Bry's choice to save money with fewer cameras worked to the android's benefit. They managed to find a box of the right height, and pushed it over to the door when the camera was watching elsewhere. Tink climbed up until it was facing the lock plate. It began to rub the plate with the end of one of its metal arms until the plate began to hum. Then Tink started to hum. And when Tink's humming matched the frequency from the lock plate, the door popped open. "I guess Bry doesn't know that these old locks can be coaxed into giving up the key without even setting off the alarm," said Tink, jumping down from the box. Tish and Sue pushed the box back to its original position just as a security camera swept by that section of the warehouse. If whoever was monitoring the security camera looked closely, they may have noticed that the door was cracked open. But as the camera swept by the door, no alarm sounded. The androids quickly pushed open the door a bit wider so they could all squeeze through single file. Sue was the last to slip through the door, but before she got through, the security camera swung by the door and got a glimpse of her from behind as she walked out into the dark lot behind the building. The next morning, when Sue's recharge light snapped off, she still felt groggy. She got only about 3 hours recharge time and knew she would have to recharge again in the middle of the day or she'd never last. There was a knock at her door. "We're on a job together today," said Dee Dee as she walked into Sue's apartment and handed her an info tab. Sue plugged the tab into the memory port under her left arm and said, "The Rutherford again?" "They should have replaced some of those systems years ago. Then they wouldn't have all these problems." "Work for us, though, right?" replied Dee Dee. After working at the Rutherford for 3 hours, Sue told Dee Dee she would have to stop and recharge. Dee Dee said she was feeling a bit run down too, and suggested they go spend some time in a social hall. There was a social hall nearby, smaller than the one Sue had been to before. They sat down at a vacant booth near the door. "Didn't you get enough recharge time last night?" asked Dee Dee casually. "I was out late with some friends from work," said Sue. "Oh, and where did you all go?" asked Dee Dee. Dee Dee seemed to be just making casual conversation, but Sue wasn't sure. The Dee Dee from her time was always trying to get ahead of everyone else at Enviro Repair, no matter what the cost to others. Sue didn't get along with that Dee Dee, and wondered if this Dee Dee was the same. Sue decided not to tell Dee Dee about where she was last night. "They were just showing me around town." "I thought Kay did that yesterday," said Dee Dee, suspicious of Sue's short answer. "He didn't show me everything," said Sue as she stood up. She was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with this whole conversation. "I think I'll go by Kay's apartment. Maybe he's in and I can use his recharge light for a while. It'll take too long to recharge in here." "When can I tell Quig we'll be back to finish up the Rutherford job?" "Tell her I'll be back in a few hours. What we've already done should tide her over until then." Sue walked out of the social hall onto the walkway out front. When she looked back, she could see Dee Dee had immediately contacted someone on her communicator. It was probably only Quig, the manager of the Rutherford, but maybe Dee Dee was contacting someone else. As Sue walked up to Kay's front door, a female android was leaving his apartment. Sue felt a little twinge of jealousy and wondered about the strange feeling. Why should she care who Kay had in his apartment? As the android passed her, Sue saw she was carrying an android repair toolkit. Sue walked through Kay's door before it shut and saw him lying on the couch with a big bandage around his leg. "What happened?" Sue felt a little panicky, thinking that Kay may be seriously hurt. "I lost my balance and hit my leg against the table when I tried to fix the overhead light." Sue looked up at the ceiling where Kay pointed and saw that the light cover was hanging by one side. "My leg is not as bad as it looks," said Kay, a little pleased at Sue's obvious worry over him. "The doc says I shouldn't walk for a couple of days so my leg can repair itself." A little smile crossed Kay's face as an idea came to him of how to keep Sue near. "I'm going to need some help around here for a while. Could you bring me that reader over there on the chair?" Kay pointed to an overstuffed green upholstered chair in the corner with a small device lying on the arm. Sue walked over to the chair and picked up the reading device, then handed it to Kay. "I could stop by a couple of times a day to check on you. Right now, I need a few hours of recharge time, and I have to get back to finish a job at the Rutherford. That's why I came over, to ask if I can recharge here." Kay motioned toward his recharge room. "Help yourself. Will you stop by again after you're done at the Rutherford?" "Yes, I will," said Sue over her shoulder as she headed for the recharge room. She felt exhausted and badly needed a few hours of downtime. She laid down on the bed and switched on the light, closed her eyes, and relaxed into recharge mode.